Welcome to the Bothell City Council meeting of May 14th, 2019. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, all council members are here. Meeting agenda approval. Is there any changes to tonight's meeting agenda? Deputy Mayor?
I was interested in perhaps flipping the surface water stream health assessment report prior to the Shoreline Master Program, because I feel like it might give context to the urgency of shoreline protection and waterways in general.
Does anybody have an objection? No, except the staff person is here to start. That one first. Are we good to go? Okay. All right, moving on to the visitor comment. Wait a second, that doesn't have the proclamation on it. There's the proclamation. Okay, this is a proclamation of National Police Week. The chief here, Chief Cummins with me. Whereas in 1962, President Kennedy proclaimed May 15th as National Peace Officer Memorial Day, and the calendar week in which it falls as National Police Week to honor this and to honor the service and sacrifice of officers killed in the line of duty. And whereas there is an opportunity for 900,000 law enforcement officers serving in communities across the United States, including the dedicated members of the Bothell Police Department. And whereas it is important that all residents know that the members of the Bothell Police Department play an essential role in protecting the rights and freedoms of those in our city. Whereas there are 163 law enforcement officers killed in the line of duty in 2018 and 42 officers killed so far in 2019. Wow. On average, every 55 hours, a law enforcement officer in the United States will lose their life. And whereas since the first recorded police death in 1786, there have been 23,721 law enforcement officers killed in the line of duty, 292 of those officers from Washington State. Whereas the service and sacrifice of all officers killed in the line of duty was honored during the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund's 31st annual candlelight vigil on the evening of May 13th, 2019. Whereas May 15 is designated as Peace Officer Memorial Day and U.S. flags should be flown at half-mast or half-staff. Therefore, be it resolved, I, Andrew Rayam, the Mayor of the City of Bothell, do hereby proclaim May 12th through the 18th, 2019 as Police Week in the City of Bothell and publicly acknowledge the service of law enforcement officers in our community and the communities across the nation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Did you want to say something?
Just that it's a real honor to have this proclamation, and we'll certainly display it in the department. And it's such an honor to be able to serve a community like the community of Bothell, but with that honor oftentimes comes a price. And we've noted within the last few months, we've lost 2 officers in the state, 2 deputies in the state of Washington. So I really appreciate the fact that you took the time to do this. Thank you.
All right, moving on to the public comment period. Each person addressing the council will give his or her name in an audible tone of voice for the record, and unless the council grants further time, shall limit the address to 3 minutes. No person other than the council and the person having the floor will be permitted to enter any discussion either directly or through the member of the council without the permission of the mayor. And the first one is Sharon Dimmitt.
Good evening, council and everyone. City of Bothell, wonderful residents. I'm representing the Bothell Museum. And I have to tell you, first of all, that yes, we are now open. We open from May through the end of October, every Sunday from 1 to 4. And we've had really good success so far. We've had over 100 people every Sunday. and we're actually looking, maybe we need some more docents to handle all the questions that we have. Secondly, we're going to have a great event coming up on May 26th, the Sunday before Memorial Day. We will have our annual Pedals on the River ceremony. And what this is, when you're down at the park at Bothell Landing, right by the museum, people can bring flowers and thoughts and such, and we have a little ceremony, lots of people, lots of flower petals, and we throw them in the river and watch them and remember people. It's very, people love this little event. So that's the 26th of May, 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And bring flowers, but we will also, some of the local florists have also donated some of the flowers that they can no longer use. I think the biggest thing we want to say is, and people are amazed by this, on the 4th of July parade, the Bothell Museum will be celebrating its 50th anniversary. It was started in 1986, if my math is right, but 50 years ago, and they resided right on Main Street on 102nd and Main until the city very wisely decided to help move the buildings over to the park. So we're going to be having some activities, and we'll be in the parade, and come and see us. We really do have, we've got the schoolhouse and the Hannon House and the wonderful Beckstrom Cabin, and people are loving it. So everybody come on down, and we will give you a good time. Thanks.
Thank you. Next is Ann Agard.
Ann Agard at 16524 104th Northeast. In a few minutes at your study session, you're going to look at the periodic Shoreline Master Program update that the Shoreline Board that you appointed in 2018 has brought forth for your consideration. And at that time, you appointed the board for 5-year terms to 2023. So I'm asking you that you consider, when you come to your docketing for February for your 2020 docket, and in last February you made a decision to consider the buffer reduction option for the Sammamish River during that docketing time for 2020. So I ask that you consider reconvening the board at that time to consider this issue, which would involve an amendment to the Bothell Shoreline Master Program. The reason I do so is I felt that the board operated in an amazingly good fashion. We were respectful of each other. We had a good representation of different interests and abilities. The meetings were well run by our chair, Pat Ewing, and it resulted in a unanimous decision for the packet that's before you tonight during your study session. So thank you for this opportunity, and I look forward to visiting with you later.
All right, thank you. Next is Bill Root.
I have a display. Okay. Okay. My name is William Root. I live at 1406 243rd Place Southeast, Bothell. I'm here tonight to talk about the pending book sale that's put on semi-annually by the Friends of the Bothell Library. And so we start preparing for the sale on Wednesday, And we're looking for volunteers to help us set up the venue. It's at the Bothell Library. And there's the 2 days of the sale. The first one is on Friday, May 17th at between 5 and 7 p.m. It's members only, and you can pay a $5 membership fee at the door. For families, it's $15, and that's good for a year. So that's 2 book sales. We have book sales in May and November. And on Saturday, May 18th, it's open to the public. Anybody can come in. They don't have to pay a membership fee. And from 10 a.m. To 4 p.m. And I would encourage you to, you all need books. You know you need books. So I'm memorizing faces, and I hope to see you there. Okay. And if you have a spouse or a friend who is a reader and doesn't know about the book sale, I would encourage you to have them attend, because every sale benefits the library. And the library, of course, like any public organization, is always looking for extra funds, for more money. Anyway, and also on Saturday at 4 p.m., we have a 1-hour window to get all of the books packed into boxes and set aside before the library closes. And that is a frenetic, monstrous affair. And if you want to see theater, and if you want to help us, come to the sale and be there at Saturday afternoon between 4 and 5. Anyway, hope to see you there. Thank you.
Thank you. That's the last sign-up sheet. Does anybody else want to provide public comment? Go once, go twice. Okay. Next is it's actually supposed to come before visitor comment, but the staff briefing, the sustainability team update with Sabrina Combs.
All right. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight we'll be providing you with an update about all of the sustainability programs we have going on in the city. Let me start by introducing the team. We have Sabrina Combs. I'm Emily Warnock, and this is Christy Cox. And thank you for approving the part-time sustainability assistant position. I'm excited to be here tonight. Starting with solid waste, sustainability staff participate in MISWAC as well as the recycling task force in an effort to help divert material from the landfill. Currently, our residential diversion rate is 65%. Recology Cleanscape staff will also be presenting in more detail on diversion rates as well as our WasteWise multifamily program coming up in July. Additionally, King County Solid Waste Comprehensive Plan was approved by King County Council last month, and they are scheduled to present to you coming up on June 4th. In light of all of these changing recycling rules, we have been really working hard to educate the community about what does and doesn't belong in each bin. We've partnered with Recology Cleanscapes as well as volunteer groups to help provide residential, commercial, and multifamily cart audits on a larger scale. We're also providing education through print, online, and in-person sources. In order to reduce contamination issues, we recently piloted a program using volunteers to go out and audit residential carts. So we took groups out, looked in both recycling and organics bins, and noted and took photos of contamination that we saw. With this data, we then went and created postcards to target the most common contaminants in each neighborhood and provide direct education to those residents. After educational materials were distributed, we then went back and conducted a second audit to determine the effectiveness and assess behavior change, as well as see what additional education was needed. For residents with ongoing contamination issues, we then moved to cart tags, which allow us to identify precisely what items are in recycling and organics bins that don't belong, and really tailor the education to residents. And along with that, notices of violation and fines can be issued depending on the severity of the recurrence. Lastly, stay tuned for information on upcoming bans on single-use items. So as I mentioned, we piloted our program with volunteers to conduct residential audits. Overall, we found that about half of the bins in the city that we looked at had some level of contamination, though most of this was very minor amounts. Some of the more common items that we found were plastic bags and film, bagged recyclables, and food debris. And items like bagged recyclables are newer to the changing rules that we have in recycling, and we're really trying to work with residents and educate more about those. Based on the success of our residential cart auditing program, we have expanded that, and starting this fall, we'll be working with students from North Shore School District's Adult Transition Program to expand residential audits across the city. In addition to solid waste, we have increased our water conservation outreach. We are really trying to educate the community about how we can use water wisely and instill a water conservation ethic. In March, we participated in the EPA's Fix a Leak Week on social media. We educated the community about facts on leaks, promoted the Saving Water Partnership's videos on how to find and fix leaks, and offered resources like toilet leak dye detecting tabs to help our residents save water. And lastly, our water quality report is coming July 1st. It will include information for the community about the sources of our drinking water, consumption patterns for last year, quality and treatment, health information, and our 2018 monitoring results for things like fluoride, turbidity, lead and copper, and much more. Now I'll pass it off to Christy to talk about surface water.
Thank you, Emily. I'm Christy Cox, and I'm going to talk to you about some of our surface water education and outreach programs. In surface water, our motto is only rain down the drain, because we want to encourage people to keep pollutants out of the storm drains and local streams. This is actually a great time to be talking about this because May is Puget Sound Starts Here Month. This is a regional campaign where we join over 750 other organizations throughout the region surrounding Puget Sound so that we can help teach people ways to protect water quality. This year's theme focuses on how to be an orca hero by doing things that reduce stormwater pollution, which then has a domino effect on improving the food chain that is critical to orca recovery. As part of Puget Sound Starts Here Month, last week we wrapped up the second annual Survive the Sound Steelhead Migration Race. This is an interactive online game where a local nonprofit organization uses real fish tracking data to follow the migration of 48 steelhead as they try to make their way to the Pacific Ocean. The Bothell community voted for our spokesfish this year, who turned out to be Fishy McFishface, and he took second place, making it to the ocean, which is great news. Unfortunately, 41 of the 48 fish did not survive the migration, which is even less than last year. So it's bad news, but it also helps raise public awareness about what's happening to some of our steelhead and salmon populations and what we can do to fix that. So now I'm going to talk to you about some of our year-round programs, starting with Natural Yard Care. This program focuses on teaching people how to have healthy lawns and gardens without using pesticides and other toxic products that would otherwise wash into the storm drains when it rains. Things like adding mulch, using compost, and putting the right plants in the right places are some of the basic principles of natural yard care. This September, we'll have a series of 3 workshops that I'm excited about, and one of them I'm most looking forward to is a do-it-yourself rain barrel workshop. This is the time of year when we start getting more calls about residential car washing, which seems to be a hard habit for a lot of people to break. So instead of washing in the driveway, we encourage our residents to use a commercial car wash, use a waterless car wash product, or if you are going to wash at home, try to wash over a permeable surface like gravel or dirt so that the pollutants can filter into the surface below instead of just draining out into the street. City of Bothell also promotes the regional Don't Drip and Drive campaign, where we point residents to free workshops led by mechanics that teach them how to check for, identify and prevent vehicle leaks before they turn into major problems. I know our pet waste program might not be the most glamorous one to talk about, but it's definitely an important one. Leaving pet waste on the ground creates a health risk for people, wildlife, stream habitat, and other dogs. So when it comes to pet waste, we ask everyone to scoop it, bag it, and put it in the trash every time. So now I want to talk to you about a few of the partnerships we have that make some of our education and outreach programs possible. Being in 2 counties, we have the advantage of working with both the Snohomish and King Conservation Districts to help protect our natural resources. These non-regulatory state agencies provide conservation and stormwater guidance and hands-on assistance to landowners, private developments, HOAs, schools, and more. Some of my favorite projects that we worked on with the conservation districts include, up in the corner, we did some residential rain garden cluster projects up by Bothell High School, and then that picture on the bottom is from a green schoolyards project that we did at Crystal Springs Elementary. Another partner that we're happy to have is Nature Vision, whom we contract with to provide stormwater youth education to students aged preschool through grade 12 in Bothell schools. One of the great things about delivering stormwater lessons to kids in the classroom or on a field trip is that many of them share the concepts they learned with their parents. So the education is reaching beyond just the student. And finally, it's partnerships that help us provide meaningful stewardship opportunities to the community. This year, we partnered with Friends of North Creek Forest for several of our volunteer events, and we were pretty surprised at how many people came out to help, especially for Martin Luther King Jr. Day of Service. I think we had over 100 show up and had to go get more refreshments. And now that we have Shelby Crow, who is the city's new volunteer and special event coordinator on board, we look forward to building more partnerships so that we can offer a wider variety of stewardship opportunities for the community. Now I'm going to turn it over to Sabrina to talk more about the city's sustainability programs.
Thanks, Christy. So one of the ways that we work together is we promote hazardous waste programs and how to reduce the use of toxic items in homes and businesses. Also, we talk about proper storage. So for residents, we promote the Waste Mobile. We offer a Waste Mobile checklist online that they can sign up for, request, and we mail out to them. It walks them through how to go through their home and collect those items and take them to the Waste Mobile that's available here in the community. We also promote information to small quantity generators we refer to as SQGs or businesses. And these are individuals that we remind about proper storage, disposal options they have, and they can even use the Waste Mobile as well. So we send them out information and resources. We also do site visits. Then for senior citizens, we remind them about the program for home collection. This is handled through Waste Mobile staffers. And what's great about this is it allows them to not have to go to the Waste Mobile, but they can actually call and have this service come to them at their home. When we realized how difficult it was for residents to switch from toxic or harmful or hazardous cleaners, we thought about different ways that we could assist them. So last year we launched a pilot of giving them coupons for the green cleaning station at the Recology store. This was rather successful, and citizens actually called in and said, "Ooh, this was really helpful and I loved using this." So we figured, let's roll it out again through our grant program. And so we put this together again, and this time we included recipe cards so they can continue to do it. So it promotes reuse of a spray bottle. It also allows them to make their own cleaners, and then they get the recipe cards so they can do more on their own. So all they have to do is sign the pledge at bothellwa.gov Green Clean Pledge, and we send those out to them. So it's really easy for them. Another way that we're helping with sustainability is with our employees through the commute trip reduction program. This is something that offers them an incentive for using alternatives to coming to work in a single occupancy vehicle. So these are some of the alternatives that we promote. Today was one of the days when I in fact handed out what we call rewards for commuting. So people who are commuters got little cookies that thanked them for commuting, and they enjoyed those. And some of them stopped by to say thank you because it was a fun little gift for taking that extra step. This year, our efforts paid off because we had 2 Commuter of the Quarter winners. We had Nicole from Public Works, who was walking to work, and then we had Dave from Fire, who's biking to work. So they were selected as Commuter of the Quarters and were nominated as Commuter of the Year. They didn't win Commuter of the Year, but it was so exciting to go to the event and have 2 submissions for that program. The best thing is that if you're driving around the area, you might see their faces on buses and see the stories of how they're getting to work. King County Metro contacted us and said, we have this really great program called Orca to Go. Is the city of Bothell interested? So we started looking into what this would look like, and basically they bring a kiosk into the city, and on the 2nd and 4th Thursday of each month from 1:30 to 3:30 p.m., they offer Orca card services and Metro information. So with all of the new changes we have with buses coming into the area and Green Line launching, this was a really great opportunity for the community. So what we did was last Thursday, we had a launch party with root beer floats for staff and the community. And we also promoted Bike Month, since Biked Everywhere Day is Friday. And we promoted these 2 things together, and we had over 60 people come in and talk about how they commute to work, ask questions, as well as update their Orca cards and get new amounts added. So it's been a really great resource for the community that we're excited about. So this is something that when we're doing projects in the area, we can also remind the community that on the 2nd and 4th Thursday of each month, they can come in and have assistance with Orca or find out about transit options. Another thing that we're working on with sustainability is related to our facility improvements. Looking around the buildings and working with our custodial staff this year, we've really talked about some improvements that we could make to make the building more sustainable. Some of those things are bathroom composting. We've just reinforced that and made sure that the bathroom composting is happening, so our paper towels are going to composting instead of the landfill. We also are changing simple systems, one of which is we found out that in some of our LEED buildings, we were using these little tiny bottles of soap because they were a green cleaning soap. And when we looked at that, we thought, those are really little and they're not very recyclable. So we talked with the custodial team and identified that we had all those pump stations at each of those sinks. So we're switching all of those pumps to dishwashing soap, which can be used for hands or dishwashing, and getting rid of the little bottles. So it was a simple change, but it was working together to identify a solution for sustainable practices for the city. Then with staff, we're doing a lot of education. So one of the things that we did this year is Emily and I went around and we looked in all of the desk side containers and looked to see how staff were handling their materials. When we noticed that somebody was not doing a good job, they got an oops tag, and the oops tag clearly identified what they needed to do. It also gave them our information if they wanted to ask questions, and we did receive a couple of emails. And then if they were doing a good job, they got a way to go tag with reminders about empty, clean, and dry, and a cookie. So this picture is actually from community development because they were talking so vigorously about who did well and who did not, and then they decided to share their tags. And then with that, we also move forward with doing a little additional step of updating our containers. So some of our public containers, we've added enhanced signage or moved the containers or put in better containers to make it easier for the public using public spaces. And then when we started looking at ways we could reduce contamination, one of the things we realized that was a problem is our public containers in the City Hall parking garage. So working with the custodial team, we have, and our hauler Recology Cleanscapes, we've locked those containers for only the custodial or sustainability staff to access. This prevents people from just dropping items in and putting them in the wrong carts. It also allows staff to work with custodial or sustainability about items they might have that need to go in those correct containers, or allows us to find solutions for those items. One of which we found out recently was when new computers are ordered by IS and the different pieces of material that come in those boxes and how we can sort those out and get those to the right location for recycling. Then this year, we were very excited to bring back the Shred event. We worked with Records and Information Management Committee, and what happened is that the King County Solid Waste Division worked with cities to determine that we should say that we are not accepting shredded paper in recycling carts anymore. This was due to contamination issues as well as impacts it was having on the machinery processing recyclables. So once we realized that, we were able to work with our recycling grants and brought back the shredding event. 268 cars came through with 4.8 tons of paper that was shredded. So this event was a huge success. The community, as part of this event, we asked that they bring canned food items, and they donated 675 food items to the Maltby Food Bank. So this was a really great event, and we're currently planning a fall event for the community as well. Then coming up in August, we have Sustainamania. It's coming back, and we are excited about it. It's going to have a focus of land, sea, and air, just to allow the community to have really focused conversations about how they can make those behavior changes to impact those areas of the environment. So that will be here at City Hall on August 10th from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. With that, we want to thank you for supporting sustainability and let you know you can find information about our programs at bothelwa.gov, sustainability. And then if you have any questions for us, we're here to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you guys have any questions? Councilmember McNeil?
You mentioned film was one of the common things found. What was that really film? Like photography film?
That's a great question. So plastic film is something like plastic wrap. It's a 2D plastic that folds flat like plastic bags.
Councilmember Olson?
Did you have any information on the follow-up on the second audit that you did? If there was, noticeable improvement from, I guess the question is, did you go back and visit the same ones, and is there data for if people improved with the education?
We did see some improvement, and that's why we're finding this to be a beneficial program. In fact, we're just enhancing the educational postcards that we're doing. So that's why we're going to work with North Shore School Districts and launch this as an ongoing program that we use to audit containers.
I just had a quick question. The notice of violations, have we given any of those out to residents?
Per council's request, we started with education communication. The only notice of violations that have gone out have been related to specific things that the code compliance officers worked on and not related to our process for cart tagging.
Okay. So that's a no for residents. Okay. All right. Thank you. Well done. Next on the agenda is, I'm going to start using the printed one because I keep missing stuff. There we go. we got it switched. AB 19-083 Surface Water Stream Health Assessment Report.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Chris Hall. I'm one of the surface water program coordinators here at the city. My focus area is water quality and looking at streams and stormwater monitoring around the city. I just want to thank you all for giving me the time to present on our surface water stream health assessment. And without any further ado, let's dive into the presentation. So here's just a general outline of the topics that we're going to be covering today in the presentation. Why do we care about surface water? What some of the background data of our streams say, what we're doing to protect surface water, what more can be done, and how long until we see some improvement in some of our streams. So starting with, why do we care about surface water? Well, for one thing, many of our community actually use our streams for recreation purposes, whether that be playing in them, boating or swimming, and contact with unhealthy surface waters can cause both short-term and long-term health effects. Aquatic wildlife, such as salmon or other fish, also use our streams for habitat and food and general survivability. Natural surface water systems also provide positive benefits to the Bothell community, both from aesthetics and economic opportunities. And if those three things were enough, we're also required as a city to actually look at our surface water and stormwater because we have a Western Washington Phase 2 municipal stormwater permit. And along with all those, everything that we do in our local water bodies drain downstream. So if we're good stewards of our own water bodies, it also means we're being good neighbors to the jurisdictions around us. So you've heard me use the term stormwater a couple of times. What is it and where does it come into play? When it rains, water falls on hard surfaces such as roads, buildings, parking lots, picking up pollutants along the way. This water then flows into storm drains, as you can see in the figure there, by King County, and gets discharged into our local water bodies. Sometimes there's basic treatment that can remove some of the pollutants, such as sediment or metals, but oftentimes it actually gets discharged directly into our streams. Some of the pollutants that you can typically find in stormwater are things like petroleum products and other vehicle fluids, metals, soil from construction sites, bacteria from pet waste and failing septic systems, fertilizers, and pesticides from lawns and gardens. Many of these pollutants are unhealthy for both people and the environment. So here's just a general figure showing unhealthy versus a healthy stream. Unhealthy streams carry pollutants from human sources, which pose health risks for people, pets, and aquatic wildlife that inhabit the stream. They also have less tree cover, which leads to higher stream temperatures and lower dissolved oxygen. On the flip side, healthy streams provide safe recreation opportunities along with thriving aquatic wildlife. Healthy streams are also more enjoyable to look at. So now that we talked about why we care about surface water, we can get into my favorite part, which is the data. Two things we look at when we're monitoring for our surface waters is status and trends monitoring. Status allows us to characterize streams in the moment and answer questions such as what is the current health of our streams, or are we meeting water quality standards for specific parameters such as temperature or dissolved oxygen. Trends, on the other hand, tell us how things are changing over time, such as is dissolved oxygen in North Creek going up or down, or are stream bug communities improving or degrading? Trends also give us some indication of effectiveness of our programs and our water quality improvement projects when done on the correct scale. One very important note to make, and I'll probably make this note a couple times, is that trends can take a very long time to detect. Statistical trends aren't perfect, and without enough data, sometimes year-to-year variability can disguise itself as a trend. For this reason, it's good to know detecting trends takes patience and may take longer than we like, especially if we want to detect trends at the watershed scale. So now that we talked about that, we can talk about some of our status of water quality. We monitored streams for several different parameters, including fecal coliform, temperature, dissolved oxygen, pH, and turbidity. Now I'm going to show some graphs. So this is a box plot. I'll describe what a box plot is first. The box you see on the graph represents data from the 25th to the 75th percentile. The middle line there is the median, which is kind of the middle value of what we find. The whiskers, or the lines, and the dots represent the minimum and maximum values found. On the y-axis, you can see the sites that we sampled, and on the x-axis, you can see the values. So first, we're going to talk about fecal coliform. Fecal coliform is bacteria found in the intestines of warm-blooded organisms, and high levels of fecal coliform can be a sign of sewage waste, manure, or concentrated wildlife. At high concentrations, it poses health risks to humans and the environment. In Bothell, we have a water quality standard of 50 colony-forming units per milliliter, which is that red line on the box plot. And as you can see, 4 out of the 5 sites fall above that line. We also monitor for temperature within our streams. Increased temperature causes negative impacts on fish and other aquatic wildlife. Increased temperatures affect mortality rates, physiology, and growth. Because of that, we have a water quality standard in Bothell of 16 degrees Celsius, which is that red line. And as you can see, at all sites sampled, except one at Palm Creek, they exceeded the 16 degree Celsius threshold at some point during the summer. We also looked at dissolved oxygen. Like us, aquatic wildlife also needs oxygen to survive. We have a water quality standard of 9.5 milligrams per liter. And similar to temperature, all sites failed to meet that threshold except one at some point during the summer. And many sites even had a majority of their sample points below that threshold. We also look at pH. In general, surface waters with a pH between 6.5 and 8.5 is considered healthy, which is pretty much our range here. And we looked at turbidity, which is the amount of clarity lost in water due to suspended particles such as dirt or debris. For the most part, we also fell within acceptable ranges for turbidity, except during heavy storm events. So as a summary, fecal coliform is too high. Summer temperatures are also high, and summer dissolved oxygen concentrations are low. We also looked at trends in a couple of the parameters. So this is a graph showing temperature at 4 of our continuous temperature monitoring stations over the course of 7 years in some of the sites. We used a statistical trend analysis detection test called the seasonal Mann-Kendall trend detection test. And using that, we saw increasing temperatures in 3 of the 4 monitoring stations. We also ran a similar trend detection test at ambient weather stations for air temperature over that same time period and saw a similar trend, which makes sense. As air temperatures increase, we'll also see increases in in-stream temperatures. Once again, just to make the note that 7 to 8 years is not a lot of time to make a robust statistical trend detection. But also, as global climate change worsens and air temperatures increase, we can most likely expect to see in-stream temperatures to continue to increase as well. We also looked at dissolved oxygen for trends. Using the same trend detection test, we found that 7 of the 9 ambient sites that we sample at are also decreasing in dissolved oxygen over time. Dissolved oxygen is actually highly correlated with temperature. This is because the solubility of oxygen decreases as temperature increases, which just means that cold water holds more oxygen than warm water does. So it makes sense that both temperature and dissolved oxygen are struggling at the same time. And also, just as a note, you may have seen that uptick at the end there in January 2019. This doesn't mean that dissolved oxygen is getting better. It's just that I went out on a very cold day, and that's the correlation factor there. So in general, over time, most of our sites are failing for both temperature and dissolved oxygen, which makes sense because of the correlation of each other. You can see this goes year by year, looking at both temperature on the x-axis and dissolved oxygen on the y-axis, that as temperature increases, dissolved oxygen decreases. And just in general, more sites are failing both of those parameters as time goes on. Along with water quality, we also looked at biologic status. We did this by looking at the benthic index of biotic integrity by site, or BIBI. These BIBI scores represent the type of macroinvertebrates, which are stream bugs, present at the sites during the time of sampling. BIBI is a regional scoring system used in the Puget Sound area that takes into account the different types of stream bugs and the abundance of bugs present. Stream bugs give an excellent indication of health of the water body because some types of bugs are more sensitive to pollution than others and won't be present in polluted streams. The graph on the left shows all the sites sampled at different years in Bothell with their corresponding BIBI values. The red line indicates a BIBI score of 20, which is very poor. Yellow is 40, which is poor. Green is 80, which is excellent. And you can tell by the graph that a majority of the sites in Bothell have BIBI scores of very poor to poor, with an exception of Palm Creek, which is kind of creeping into the good section. We didn't have enough data to conduct a trend detection, but it does appear that maybe some of the sites might be improving, such as Palm Creek. Along with that, we also looked at Bothell BIBI scores in comparison to the regional reference site. The regional reference site is a Washington State Department of Ecology Sentinel ambient monitoring location that looks at streams in minimally impacted areas, which is nice so that we can compare what streams should be like when there's no disturbance around. We also compared BIBI to nearby cities. For the most part, as you can see on the graph, Bothell is comparable with other cities in the Puget Sound area. This is also a consistent trend seen nationwide, that as you get more development, BIBI scores typically are lower. Now that we've talked about some of the data of the last decade in Bothell, let's talk about what we're currently doing to protect stream health. One thing we're doing is monitoring. We continue to adaptively monitor and analyze results to inform the city of status and trends in stream and stormwater health so that decision makers can make decisions. This data is also used in prioritization efforts for water quality improvement projects going forward, such as restoration projects. The City of Bothell also has a robust education and outreach program on preventing pollution. We reach out to residents, businesses, and the general public. Education and outreach is an excellent way of reducing pollution because, like it says there in the second bullet point, changing our habits is more effective and costs less than trying to clean up the pollutants once they've actually entered our system or entered our streams. We also have a pollution prevention and municipal operations and maintenance program. This is where all the public and private storm facilities are inspected annually. Inspectors and field staff look for how much sediment is contained in the facility and if it's still functioning as designed. These sites are also maintained as necessary. The city also looks at all city catch basins every 2 years and maintains those as well as necessary. We also have an asset repair, improvement, and replacement program. Storm and surface water staff capture opportunities to reduce flooding, improve water quality treatment, and repair infrastructure to protect and restore stream health. We have an illicit discharge detection and elimination program that the city established for responding to spills and illicit discharges. We provide education, assistance, and enforcement as necessary. Many of our spills get reported to our spill hotline, which gets routed to internal staff to respond. Public Works has a robust spill response procedure to deal with spills found or reported. The city also offers free on-site technical assistance to help small businesses identify and resolve causes of pollution. We make sure that products and waste are stored properly, as you can see in the photo, showing proper secondary containment. We also provide spill kits and spill response plans. As of today, the city has inspected over 850 small businesses since the beginning of the program. The city also requires developers to design and implement techniques and practices to reduce pollution as much as possible. We also have inspectors that go out to construction sites to make sure that they're implementing those best management practices, such as the things you can see in that picture, like silt fences or straw wattles. So that's what we're currently doing. What more can be done? Well, beginning in 2019, we're implementing a couple more projects or programs. Comprehensive stormwater planning, coordinating with long plan update. We're in the beginning of creating our stormwater action management plan, which looks at things like water quality and land use and helps prioritize specific areas for water quality improvement projects, such as restoration projects or stormwater retrofits or enhanced education and outreach in areas. We're also starting a new program for local businesses, stormwater inspections. So staff will go out and look at the outside of businesses and make sure that there aren't any potential source control issues or stormwater pollution issues at local businesses. And we provide technical assistance, education, and enforcement also as needed. We also have a new code compliance officer that will help in this effort. So besides that, we also have some further recommendations. As you saw in a lot of the data, temperature and dissolved oxygen is struggling in Bothell. And really this is the case nationwide also. And it is statewide, the greatest source of impaired waters is temperature and dissolved oxygen. The best thing that we can do to protect against that is protect the areas directly adjacent to the streams, also known as the riparian zone. So providing vegetation next to the streams in the riparian zone helps reduce stream temperatures and increase dissolved oxygen, both of which are struggling. It also provides habitats for both aquatic and land wildlife. Recent updates to the Shoreline Master Plan will actually help achieve this recommendation as well. Along with protecting the riparian zone, using best available science for restoration projects will also help. We can be prioritizing areas and restoration projects in an efficient and cost-effective manner to look at watershed restoration holistically. So with that, an important and pretty tricky question is how long until we see an improvement in our local water bodies? Well, it has taken decades and even centuries for our watersheds to become as degraded as they are currently. And unfortunately, it will most likely take just as long to restore them, or at the very least prevent further degradation. One positive note is that we can see improvements at the local scale. So for example, when we implement water quality improvement projects, such as restoration efforts along a stream section, we may not see the impacts of that directly in the watershed right away, but we can see it at the local project site. And as we implement more and more of those projects, has a cumulative effect, and we can start to move the needle on some of our watershed health. So these things take time, but in the long run, they're worth it to see improvements in our local watersheds. So with that, I just want to thank you for giving me the time to present and open it up for any questions.
All right, thank you. Is there any questions? Councilmember Zorns?
I think that these are questions that are related to the status monitoring. And it's a curiosity point because I really want more time to digest the data that we were given. It's very meaty and very comprehensive. But I ran across some terms that I was kind of hoping you would help me understand.
Sure.
Without giving me a, college course on it. So in layman's terms, I saw, it was on page 83, it used terminology of larger substrate scrubbed prior to kicking.
Oh, okay.
What is that?
Sure. So that's referencing how we sample for stream bugs or macroinvertebrates. So I can just explain that process. When I go collect bugs, I have a kick net with me that's kind of like a fine mesh net, and I'll go out and the bugs are found in the substrate and the rocks and stuff of the stream. So the bigger rocks, cobble size to boulder, you can't really kick them and get the bugs. So you pick those up and you have a brush and you scrub the larger size substrate.
Oh, interesting.
And yeah, so if you go out to a stream and you pick up a rock, you can actually see some of the stream bugs. It's pretty interesting.
Kind of like going to the beach at minus tide.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
and so yeah, that's all that means is that you scrub the bugs off and collect them in your net so that
Okay.
we can ship them off to the lab.
Okay. Here's another question. And I'm guessing that this is just measuring something as it exists at this specific point in time. It was non-parametric trend test. Does that just take raw data at that particular point in time, or is?
No, that's a statistical term. Non-parametric means that the data doesn't act in a way that is parametric. So parametric is kind of like a bell-shaped curve, or it means that if you take a sample of, say, 30 samples, you get an idea of where those samples might lie.
Okay.
So non-parametric just means that there's really no trend to what
interesting.
to where the sample results are. So it's more randomized, if that makes
Okay,
sense.
yes, no,
So
that does.
environmental samples a lot of times don't follow a specific pattern, so they take specific different statistical analyses to
Okay.
conduct.
Okay, those were just two that leapt out at me. I'm not going to make
Sure.
you go through the whole thing with me, but thank you.
Any other questions? Councilmember Agnew?
I'm curious as to how the Sammamish River is doing. I know when I came on council almost a decade ago, we had some problems with some heavy metals in it, and I'm wondering if those are still a problem and what we're going to do to rectify that.
Yeah, so the Sammamish River hasn't historically been monitored as much in Bothell, so I don't have the data to necessarily back up that answer. But we are starting this year looking at measuring the Sammamish River for some of those pollutants. So hopefully that can inform a little bit of those decisions. Yeah.
Councilmember McAuliffe.
Thank you. Thank you. So I guess I'm going to ask, we know what best practices really are. Kind of know that it's reducing the temperature, putting in the trees, and there's probably a lot of other things that you could probably add to that. But what I'm curious about is, it takes more of a joint effort. So if you're going to look at the Sammamish River, you have to say from Kenmore to Redmond, do we have a joint effort that we're all working together to restore this river? Because if we don't have a joint effort, each one of us individually struggle to take care of our own area.
Do you want to take this one?
Beyond your...
A little more history.
Okay.
Hi, Janet Gear, Surface Water Supervisor. So we have, every jurisdiction that has a storm system also has that same municipal permit. And so everybody's working together on various aspects to improve water quality. As far as specific projects along the Sammamish, in the past, we've worked with all of the jurisdictions up and down all the way to the confluence at Lake Washington on a relief program, you know, installing trees, that type of thing, removing invasive species we've done in the past. And then my understanding is that they were looking into potentially working together in the future, so that might be something that Jennifer can speak to as well.
Last year, I met at the request of the city of Kenmore, who is under an order from one of the tribes to clean up their end of the river. So they're at the end of the Sammamish River, and they can't do that without the help of all the cities throughout the Sammamish River. And so we met to initiate discussions on how we could work together. They have hired a nonprofit to assist them with that, and my understanding is another meeting will be set shortly.
So if I may, it's one of my biggest interests is to see if we can have a joint effort from Kenmore all the way to maybe Redmond. And so if there's something that's going on and they might need someone to kind of be a part of that, I would hope you would let me know.
Will do.
Deputy Mayor.
This is probably for Janet as well. Could you tell us the percentage of septic in the city?
We did talk about that a little bit. It is about 10%.
Sorry, I went to cough.
Oh, that's right. No, I mean that when we talked
when we
today,
spoke, yeah.
we did take a look, and but it really is mostly in the Snohomish County portion outside of our water sewer service area. Most of them are not in the King County portion.
And then what are the challenges to converting to off of septic?
So one of them is cost. A lot of these were put in place because there wasn't sewer available. And, you know, as they're required to put in water, they're not necessarily required to bring in sewer, is my understanding. So that's why you have areas where they have water hookup, but they're still on septic. In the past, we have looked at having them connect, and we do have an ordinance in place that when a pipe goes along the frontage of their property, that they have 5 years to connect. However, that is a huge burden on residents at some places where they have, you know, they have to go 40 feet, that kind of thing, 50 feet in order to reach it. So it can be very expensive. So we have one of the options of requiring connection. Another thing that we do is we do with the fecal coliform testing. If we find spikes, then we work with the health district to determine if it is a septic system in the area, and then we get them into compliance, whether that's connecting or, you know, fixing their system. Another option that we could do is something similar to what Snohomish County does, where we ask people that have a septic system to certify that they've had it inspected and maintained every 3 to 5 years. So that's not something we're currently doing, but that's something that we could think about.
I would be interested in looking into that if and when we have time.
Okay.
Sorry. Of the list, I'm looking on page 70, so it talks about petroleum products, metals and fluids from vehicles, bacteria from pet waste and failing septic systems, soil from construction sites, and fertilizers and pesticides. Could you prioritize which of those are the biggest challenges or the biggest, have the biggest impact on the poor quality of our water?
It's an interesting question, simply because they're not equal.
Right.
I could say from like a spill response standpoint, the most of the spills that we respond to are petroleum products, and so that's an issue as far as roads and vehicles go. As far as when we do testing, the crux of testing water quality is the more you test for, the more you find.
Right.
So King County, I think they tested for 40 different pesticides and found like 38 of them. So it's very expensive to test for, and we currently don't test for pesticides in our streams. We test for the easier sampling, so temperature, dissolved oxygen, pH, those types of things. So we're typically not testing for all of those.
I guess what I'm trying to get to is what if any low-hanging fruit there is for us to try to impact. And I was curious about the fertilizers and pesticides, and if there's some way to impact how much usage there is amongst residents, and hopefully we're already within the city staying away from those things.
Mm-hmm. I'm trying to think. There's
Low-hanging fruit.
Yeah.
I think the not the problem, but the problem with a lot of those pollutants is they're interconnected. So they all drain through stormwater. So if you're tackling one of them through looking at how to deal with stormwater, you might be able to tackle all of them. Yeah, the problems with, say, like fertilizers and pesticides and herbicides, a lot of the people using them are using them to how they're supposed to.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that they're still running off. So there's things you can do, such as education and outreach to for other ways, such as like natural yard care, which we are already doing.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have anything else to add?
And I can't speak, for the parks. I know that we've reduced a lot in our maintenance and operations of utilizing pesticides and chemical fertilizers. They've gone to more natural uses. I can say that for the residents, we've been doing, I think, 9 years now of a natural yard care program, trying to show people different techniques. We don't have any regulations or anything along those lines as far as not allowing their use. We just require people to utilize the best management practices for them, so they have to follow the manufacturer's guidelines in order to apply them correctly.
Like Roundup, which is supposed to be safe. Okay, well, yeah, I guess I was just curious in learning more about that, because I know even the natural fertilizers are usually, I would imagine, would impact the fecal coliform numbers. So that maybe we should just ban lawns. That would solve the problem. Okay, thank you so much.
There we go. Councilmember McNeil.
Thank you, Mayor. You had mentioned Palm Creek a couple times, and how it kind of was better on the charts that we had. Is there a reason for that? You know, is why it's rating better?
Well, and a lot of these sites were sampled at one specific location over a long time. So it is hard sometimes to justify that location was better than other streams. I think Palm Creek does have pretty good riparian corridors in some areas, and that could be contributing as well to some of the better results we're finding. But yeah, the sections I've walked are pretty nice.
Shaded and stuff like that,
Yeah,
so it might
yeah.
be creating that. Okay. So it's to me, the Sammamish is quite interesting because, you know, when we have a heavy rain storm, I noticed the Sammamish changes color. It actually looks like a milkshake, like a caramel milkshake, during a heavy event. And that's not necessarily coming from Bothell, but why is that happening? Where is it coming? Where do you think it's coming from? Could it be from landslides that are things that are happening up in the woods, or how do we make sure that we ensure that that's not continuing to happen? Because to me, it looks somewhat clear right now. I probably wouldn't swim in it, but during those heavy rainstorms, it does start to get that milkshake color, that caramel color.
Yeah, during heavy rainstorms, you do typically see more turbidity because you have increased flow, which causes scouring along the stream banks, which will pick up some of that dirt. And also, it's when they're transporting sediment. So the Sammamish obviously has a lot of tributaries that are feeding into it. So you're right, it could be coming from anywhere. There is natural landslides that are causing turbidities. So the answer there is that it's coming from a lot of different areas. There are things we can do, like slowing down stormwater helps, using detention and stuff like that. That way you don't see those pulses as much, and maybe you don't get as much scouring. And we do have stormwater infrastructure that's used for like detention, such as vaults or ponds and stuff like that.
And is the height of the Sammamish have, like, you know, how the depth, does that have anything to do with it as well? Dredging or you know, I hear that it's kind of at a low rate right now. It's a low level. Can that have anything to do with it? If it was deeper, it'd have more channelization might help it?
I don't think so. Maybe, but you'd probably still see a turbid response just from the heavy rain events from other tributaries feeding in sediment and stuff like that.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Say it's Woodinville next time. I have a couple quick questions. So the sampling locations, are the pictures that you provided, is that kind of like where the sample location is?
Yeah, at those ambient monitoring locations. Are you talking about the report?
Yeah, in the report, in our packet, it has a picture and it says this is such and such location.
Yeah, that was just for the total maximum daily load sites. I included a map with points on it, like made by ArcGIS, that I think shows all the sampling locations. But the pictures themselves are of only 5 of the sites.
Right. So a lot of your sites, are they kind of in the main stem channels, like North Creek, main channel?
No, a lot of them are in the smaller tributaries.
Tributaries, okay.
Yeah, we have 3 sites on North Creek and then 7 sites out in other tributaries. And we're also starting a program this summer that uses a randomized approach. So we'll be looking at, over the course of a few years, another 30 to 40 sites for detecting status. And a lot of those will be in the smaller tribs as well.
Okay, cool. And then it said in here that we do the business inspections. So it says the permit requires that we inspect commercial animal handling and commercial composting facilities. Is that because we have a total maximum daily load requirement?
It is, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's one of the requirements under the TMDL.
I was starting to get worried.
You're not doing it over there?
No. Okay, I think that's all the questions I had. There's a certain council member that wants to open up for a second round of questions. Is everybody okay with that? Councilmember Zorns, you have the floor.
Okay, so I'm not exactly sure how to approach this. I may be one of very few people in Bothell who is not a big fan of the crows. And I understand that and because I walk the wetlands on campus a lot and I see the impact, and my experience is, as I've watched salmon runs over the years, it seems like, I don't know, I need the fact. My experience says the salmon count is going down. My nose hairs counts are going down because the stench is horrible. And I understand that a lot of the fecal count is contributed to crows. So my question is, how are the crows impacting North Creek? And I know Eastern Washington is managing crows in a way that we can't manage them here on this side of the mountains. But has any conversations come up with either mitigating their impact or trying to modify their populations on our wetlands that are kind of right at the mouth there, right close to the mouth of where the confluence that feeds right into the Sammamish Slough? So is there any conversation that you're aware of on crow management?
No, not so much. They're a natural source of fecal coliform, as you hinted at. It's hard to get quantitative data on how much they're adding. You can do DNA analysis and find out that they're there, which you'll find, but it won't tell you how much of the fecal coliform is from the crows, if that makes sense. So yeah, that nice wetland area, while it provided a lot of great habitat, also provided great habitat for the crows. So that's just one of the natural problems that we're running into that's also causing fecal coliform issues. But yeah, as far as I'm concerned, there's no talks about managing the crows. Unless you...
I keep standing up and sitting down. There have been other programs, things that you can do to deter their feeding, but because they roost here, my understanding is we don't have as much, like if they were coming here and, like closing dumpsters, there's, a lot of things you can do to deter them from feeding, but they actually roost here, and so there's not too much you can do as far as capturing, outside of capturing them, that kind of thing, for roosting, because they actually, most of them aren't feeding here. They roost here, and then that's why you see that huge migration daily passing through, is because they're feeding elsewhere. So maybe it's one of those things we can get together with the other jurisdictions and figure out where they're eating. And I actually, we're required to focus on the human-caused sources, so that's the septic and pet waste and that type of thing. But there's no requirement to work on the crows, but it's something that we could look into if we were having high fecal spikes.
It just, at some point, we're going to have to look at the elephant in the room, and I know you can make it uncomfortable for them to roost. The universities put up spikes and things along, trying to protect their roof lines of their buildings. But, what do you do when they're out there in the Salix, and that's, it's a nice little safe spot for them to be.
Right.
And still keep the community at large happy about how you're making it uncomfortable for them to roost there, and that's, therein lies the rub.
It's a good point, and exactly what you're saying is because of the trees. It's because they created this wonderful habitat for them, and so it's very hard to deter them from that natural habitat. There's definitely something we could potentially look into, what we could do as far as deterring them. I just don't know how successful we'd be because of the natural area.
Yeah, I'm not asking you, to throw yourself down on your sword for this. But if you hear on, rumblings that people are not content with and starting to consider it a problem, I would be one of those voices. Okay. And if you hear of things, passing them on through the pipeline would be appreciated.
Definitely.
Does any other council member want to speak second time? Double dip? Nope. Everybody else good? Okay. Thank you. Very interesting. Appreciate it. Next is AB 19-082 Shoreline Master Program Update. Mr. Boyd.
Thank you and good evening. Tonight we're going to give you a high-level overview of the 2019 Shoreline Master Program update. I'd like to introduce a few folks here in the audience that are available to help answer questions as we get into this. First of all, we have two Shoreline Board members here representing the full board, Ann Agard and Dave Cox. And we also have our consultant, one of our consultants on the project, Amy Sumi, from Shannon Wilson, and from the State Department of Ecology, we have Misty Blair, Senior Shorelines Planner with the state. And I'll talk a little bit more about our coordination with the state as I get into this here. So this work is all, just to give some context and background, it's all being done under the State Shoreline Management Act. And specifically, we're responding to Shoreline Master Program guidelines issued by the Department of Ecology, or Ecology as we refer to them. And specifically, our Shoreline Master Program carries out provisions of the State Shoreline Management Act, and our program needs to be approved by the Department of Ecology. So that the last major update was done was completed and adopted by Council in 2013. This year is a somewhat more limited update, and It consists of changes to the Shoreline Master Program element of the Imagine Bothell Comprehensive Plan, which reflect guidance from the State Department of Ecology. It includes changes to the Bothell Municipal Code, also to reflect ecology guidance, and some changes to our shoreline jurisdiction, the extent of the shoreline jurisdiction, and the environmental designations within the jurisdiction to reflect changed conditions since the last update in 2013. Sorry, I just noticed that. So, regarding the comprehensive plan changes, they're fairly modest this time of year. The overall map has changed slightly. It's fairly undetectable at citywide scale, but this map shows our shoreline jurisdiction about 3.3 miles along the Sammamish River, 6.8 miles along North Creek, and there's 3.3 miles of shoreline jurisdiction along Swamp Creek in our planning area, outside of the city limits, but within our Snohomish County planning area. So the overall area of the shoreline jurisdiction is about 6% of our planning area of 18.1 square miles. So there's slight changes to this map in the comprehensive plan, as well as eliminating a couple of flow chart that is redundant with the regulations. The process that we've gone through has involved 6 meetings of the Shoreline's board from last November until April, when they completed their recommendations. That included a public open house that was held in conjunction with the March 11th Shoreline Board meeting, and then tonight's study session, and we are this is leading up to a joint public hearing with Ecology on June 4th. And we are going through a joint review process with Ecology and a joint 30-day comment period that we're in the middle of right now that extends until the meeting on June 4th. And that will streamline the overall adoption of this plan so that instead of the city adopting the plan and then sending it to Ecology for guidance, we'll work together to have a product that meets Ecology's requirements for City Council to adopt, and I'll get into the timeline for the last steps of that in a moment here. As I said before, the comprehensive plan amendments reflect changes in the shoreline jurisdiction on the citywide map, and we remove a redundant flow chart so that when it is changed in the regulations, we don't have to also do a comprehensive plan amendment. The code amendments include updates to definitions, reference, and habitat scoring system per Ecology's guidance. We spend a fair amount of time updating procedures for compensatory mitigation situations where there is some impact that needs to be mitigated as a result of a development project, and just how the code regulates how that can be done. This was actually not a change that was mandated by Ecology, but they did suggest that we look at our provisions to allow the use of off-site mitigation options like fees in lieu and mitigation banks that Ecology has worked fairly diligently with counties and other jurisdictions to establish, so that those mechanisms can be used by other jurisdictions. And that led to quite an extensive discussion by the Shoreline Board. And then finally, there were a group of minor amendments that were mostly focused on adding clarity and ease of use for the overall document. The Shoreline Management Code amendments that are in Attachment 2 also include this new flow chart showing that in most cases, the code will require mitigation to happen on-site and then go through a series of priorities. First, if it can't be done on-site, it should be done on adjacent property. And then the next priority would be within the same sub-drainage basin or Sammamish River reach. The next one would be to keep it within the city or municipal urban growth area, and only if none of those are available options would it be allowed in an adjacent jurisdiction, and then only if it would provide a benefit for the shoreline jurisdiction within the city of Bothell. There were 3 major mapping changes to reflect new conditions, and those include changes in the boundary of the shoreline jurisdiction as well as environment designations in 2 of the 3 cases. And then there were a number of more minor changes to reflect new data, including new wetland delineations that have been done since 2013. So the first more major map changes had to do with the daylighting of North Creek on the west side of the park at Bothell Landing. In the image on the left here, you see the current designations. And if we could lower the lights here, that would be a little bit easier to read, I believe. And while Horse Creek is not considered a water of the state, I think the presentation option, the daylighting of Horse Creek did, okay, that's better. The daylighting of Horse Creek did allow the ordinary high water mark of the Sammamish River to extend up that channel somewhat, which resulted in the jurisdiction, the 200-foot jurisdiction, extending further than it currently does. And it does extend onto our Lot A, the former Bothell Ski and Bike site. And so that caused us to designate that as part of the high-intensity environment, and so that that would have a minimal impact on development opportunities on that site. The second changed condition was the creation of the new side channel on the Sammamish River across from the park at Bothell Landing, that's shown here with the current boundaries, and here with the new boundaries, which again extend that shoreline jurisdiction 200 feet from that side channel. That does extend it further into the park, but it doesn't extend it onto any private parcels. It extends in one area across the West Riverside Trail and extends into some park improvements, but those are all allowed uses within that urban conservancy environment. And this one did not include a change in environment, just an extension of the shoreline jurisdiction. And the third one had to do with the former Wayne Golf Course back 9, where the current designations include shoreline residential on the outer 100 feet of the 200-foot shoreline jurisdiction through the back 9, since that was zoned and currently still is zoned residential, but with the city's acquisition of that property, that residential development is not on the table, so the proposal is to make that entire 200 feet urban conservancy. And again, there are and likely will be trails through that, but those are allowed uses within the urban conservancy designation. So that, again, is a very high-level review of the work that the Shoreline Board did. But with that, I'd like to open it up for questions, and particularly any comments about further depth that you would like to see when we do bring this back for public hearing on June 4th. The final adoption, we anticipate to follow that, following ecology review, and we're shooting for July 16th. That's an ambitious deadline. It means we'll need to draft responses to the comments that we receive up to June 4th by the end of that week and get those to ecology for review. But we're going to do our best to work with ecology to meet that timeline so that we can, council can adopt that before going on the August break. So with that, open it up for questions, and also we can direct questions to any of the consultants or board members that we have here.
All right. Is there any questions? Councilmember McAuliffe.
Okay, thank you, David. I'm probably going to hop around a little bit at this. First of all, the changes that are being made, I noticed we have a grant from the Washington Department of Ecology for consultant services. But in staff time, what does this really mean as far as like what it costs us? How do we, as a city, what does this require us for our staff to really complete this work? Is there some cost there?
Well, there certainly has been a fairly significant amount of staff time put into this. I don't have exact numbers, but I certainly can bring those on June 4th.
I guess I'm wondering, some of this is required by ecology, some of it is just changes in the Bothell Municipal Code that is required for us to do. So I guess I'm just wondering, how much of this is Bothell's costs and ecology adds a grant, and then is there more that comes from legislation? Or is it just the changes like Horse Creek and Wayne Land? And I mean, I'm trying to figure out who's responsible for this cost, and if we are, why, and what is it?
So as Dave mentioned, that we did receive a grant from the state of $20,000, and that was because this is deemed to be a minor amendment process. So we focused just on those things that, for the most part, that the ecology was looking for from this update. As far as the city's costs, this is something that was part of our docket, part of our work program, and the council initiated that last year. So it was just folded into our normal cost of doing business. If you're asking about specifically about the preparation of this work, if it's about the how we apply the regulations going forward, again, that would just be part of our normal course of business. So this doesn't create an additional cost for us there.
All right, thank you. And then I have a question that's on the Sammamish River side channel. So my understanding, and this is probably way past our grade now, but my understanding was when we were going to redo the park at Bothell Landing and we were going to change the Sammamish River side channel, we at one time thought there'd be restaurants, some shops, and different things that would be at the landing or close to the landing, or as it was before. Do you remember prior to
So
the changes that there?
the master plan for Park at Bothell Landing? Yeah. So none of the changes that we're making in the shoreline jurisdiction will affect the areas where those kinds of improvements were made.
But is there any opportunity for further improvements there or not? Are they gone?
No, I think there is. The master plan didn't fully develop the areas that could be developed. So
there's potential for development there. It's like a restaurant or.
If that's the desire.
Okay, just curious because it was always kind of the plan I had in my mind about how this was going to, connect to the park, kind of a little bit of a commercial issue. So. Oh, I do have one more thing. Sorry. One more thing that I do have is to thank the 7 community members who volunteered their time to serve on the Shoreline Board and really put forward the work that I think we all value. So thank you.
And I would concur with the earlier comment that the board really did work well together and tackled the work very diligently.
All right, who'd like to go next? Councilmember Zorns.
Well, I'd like to tack on thanks as well, because having been on Planning Commission, I know what it gets placed on Planning Commission, and I know that Shoreline Board had a lot to process through and think about. So kudos for bringing them together and coming up with some really great ideas. Also, thank you to the people. We in our packet was included a lot of, I guess, the sum total of letters from the community. Very thoughtful and very helpful for me. And then the layout of the agenda item itself, just super helpful and very encouraging to see what's happening in protecting our shorelines. The one thought that the compensatory mitigation is a last resort. Am I understanding that right? Is the way
Yes,
that we
that's right.
layer down on what we're going to do? Okay. My only thoughts that I want to add to how this is washing over me is that requiring mitigation and starting on site first and keeping it close is really important in keeping Bothell waters in Bothell, because it really, I'm preaching to the choir here, but it affects our streams downstream. So keeping that tight is something that that matters a lot, and I appreciate seeing it here, and I hope that it doesn't deviate. I'm sure it won't deviate from this, but I do appreciate seeing it being really tight and keeping our waters as close to their original source as possible. And those are my only comments.
All right, any other questions, comments? Deputy Mayor?
I'm going to try this again. Hopefully I won't blow everybody's eardrums out. I wanted to offer that I appreciate the difference in the in the preference to require a shoreline conditional use permit for offsite mitigation. I thought that was a really added benefit that I appreciated the board adding. And then I wondered if you could explain a little bit about how the in lieu fee program works, Mr. Cott, or whomever.
Well, I'll take a shot at it, and if any others want to jump in, please don't hesitate. So currently, King County is the only jurisdiction that has set up a in lieu fee program that we could participate in. And such a program requires a lot of work with the state and other agencies, the Army Corps, to establish. And so that's one reason that we initially suggested, staff initially and consultants initially suggested changing the language in the code from Bothell sponsored to Bothell approved, so that we could use that in instances where on-site mitigation wasn't available. So in that situation, fees would go to the county. They would determine appropriate sites that would meet our code, and that's how that would be how that would be done. Similarly, mitigation banking, there's been a lot of work to establish a mitigation bank east of Woodinville. That, again, would be really not an opportunity in the way the Shoreline Board has framed the options for that. But as other mitigation banks are established closer, there may be opportunities to use that as a compensatory mitigation strategy.
How, excuse me, how frequently do you see us using the in lieu fee instrument in terms of there's, obviously it's the last resort, so do we have some sense?
It would be used fairly rarely, but there are occasionally we do get sites where not so much in the shoreline jurisdiction, more so outside the shoreline jurisdiction, but there are some sites in the shoreline jurisdiction where we have at least explored the idea of offsite mitigation. It hasn't happened yet, to my knowledge. Well, actually, not within the shoreline jurisdiction. And I think with the conditions that are placed on it, it's going to be less likely. So we did spend a lot of time crafting rules that are probably not going to be used often, but it was deemed important to make sure that in situations where they could be used, that it be done as close to the site as possible.
Great, thanks. My last question is in regards to the letter from Suzanne Burnell. Her comments, specifically her second comment, says, please note that the shoreline restoration plan does not contain specific and quantifiable watershed goals, only general policy statements. And I'm just wondering if staff has a response to that, and how or where we would address this comment.
I didn't take that comment as that we didn't have any goals, but that I think the main point was that there was has always been a fair amount of discussion about no net loss with regard to shoreline critical areas mitigation in general. And her point was that that is not relevant or appropriate, she writes, and that we should be focusing on net gain. And since so much of our shoreline has been degraded, that we need to look more at strategies for improving those areas. And that was part of what generated the alternative buffer requirements that were adopted in 2013, and which Council has agreed to look at again in the 2020 docket. There was a fair amount of discussion about that and whether that should be a Shoreline Board recommendation for future study. It was understood that it wasn't within the scope of this project, but it is something that we can look at. And I think as we move forward, we'll perhaps see more opportunities where we implement those requirements, or where projects for other reasons have been required to restore degraded shoreline environments, and we can see the results of those, at least the early results of those.
Great, thank you so much.
All right, any other questions, comments? Thank you. Thank you, board, appreciate it. Ecology, you okay? All right, good. Just want to make sure. Keep me happy. Thanks.
Next, we have AB 19-084, Canyon Park Subarea Plan Update.
Mayor, everybody, excuse the little round robin and chair changing. This is a project that we have a lot of really great interest in from the community, as well as the council, as well as staff. And this is, of course, the Canyon Park Subarea Plan Update. We did a vision in the last couple of years, and it basically is very straightforward. They want the Canyon Park area to become an economic driver, be a multifaceted neighborhood, be connected to the natural environment, and we've had a lot of natural environment discussion tonight, so this is a natural segue, and of course, as well as become a transportation hub. These are all things that a stakeholder group identified during the last 2 years that we want to make sure and follow as we go through this process. Right now, we've been doing a lot of background work and a lot of public engagement. And this kind of shows you about where we are. The arrow shows you about the location where we are right now, about mid-May. It shows you some of the public engagement we've done, as well as some of the future public engagement we are going to be doing as well. This is basically the phase 2 effort that we have funding for right now. We're going to talk a little bit about phase 3, which we do have enough funding now, which is wonderful, and a little bit later on. One of the things that's been really exciting is we've got a great result from a survey. And this was an online survey that was formulated through a bunch of different techniques of contacting folks, anywhere from Facebook and Instagram, which was very successful, to emails, to just people picking up and kind of talking about the community. We got 333 responses. That is just amazing. I don't think in my 30 some odd years being here, I don't think I've ever seen that many responses. But interestingly enough, when we asked the folks about their situation, 59% said they live in Canyon Park, 20% work, 84% shop, and 30% own property. So we got a really great vested group of people who responded to the surveys. One of the questions we asked is the Canyon Park vision still viable? We got a 44% yes, a 36% unsure. So we know we have a lot of work to do on this aspect as well. And of course, 20% said no, they think we should do something else. One of the things we want to know is, okay, if you don't think we do, why is the situation? And the number one response we got was traffic has gotten worse and the area is already overcrowded. That is a real major component that we have been hearing not only in the last 2 years, but as we've been going through this engagement process. Here's, of course, the top concerns identified during the survey. No surprise, traffic congestion on arterials as well as side streets, so it's a very popular theme. Lack of safe and comfortable places to walk, school overcrowding, lack of affordable housing, and lack of parks or neighborhood focal point. And that's basically something to have within the park itself. Some of the other concerns was a lack of retail options and loss of small area businesses. And that was something that was identified as well, that there is a very strong business component that we're hearing within this area. This is what really interesting information. We identified, okay, what were the assets we wanted to preserve within this area? 81% said the wetlands, the natural features, that is a very critical component to this whole effort. We really want to have that natural look. 51% trail, 42% unemployment opportunities. Instead, there's still that business focus here, as well as, of course, small businesses at Canyon Corner and Canyon Park Place. Those are kind of a couple of two retail areas that are kind of the north and south areas of this area. Investment priorities, we were not surprised to see 61% relieve traffic congestion, 29% a new park. So that's something that people are really thinking about, new park. And this is something that our pros folks have identified as very exciting to them because they say, oh, this is a real interesting opportunity for us to engage another group of individuals. So we've been kind of excited about that ability. Of course, complete the pedestrian network, improve transit, and more restaurants, amenities, and those kind of things that a lot of the employees are asking for. So I'm going to talk a little bit about activity units. I hate talking about numbers this late at night, but here we go. We have a Puget Sound Regional Council framework that we have to comply with to retain the RGC designation for the Canyon Park area. And basically that framework has some criteria we have to meet. One, of course, is we have to meet a certain number of existing AUs. And when I say AUs, that's an activity unit. That means a one resident or one employee. So basically one person you have to accommodate within your area. You have to plan to accommodate 45 AUs per acre. That's important too. 640 acres is what they would prefer to have as a maximum size, as well as, of course, you want to have at least 15% of the AUs be another mixture. You can't have it all employers. You can't have it all housing. You want to have a little bit of mixture in there. One of the things that's interesting is, of course, we have some growth targets that are being established by Snohomish County that we have to meet, including we have to provide at least 4,500 residents, and that's people, within the Canyon Park area that we have to comply with by 2035. Interestingly enough, this area, I think I'll go with this one. This is a little bit more interesting. One of the features that we have been working on a lot is really understanding what is out there as far as the activity units and what that means for our future stuff. Basically, the existing Canyon Park Regional Growth Center is 733 acres. We have about 10,800 employees. I think it's more, but that's the official number. We have about 1,700 residents. That adds up to about 12,600 AUs within that regional growth center. The comp plan capacity, and one of the things about our comp plan is that we have growth projected out to 2035. We have identified that that comp plan capacity is 20,800 people. So that's the number we have. You can see in the chart below there that it's not enough to meet that 45 AU criteria. So what do we have to do? We have to start increasing the capacities within the Canyon Park Regional Growth Center. And this is an example that I wanted to throw to the council again, because this is basically about, if you take that 733 acres, you do that 45 activity units, that gets to 33,000 activity units. That's basically the number of people we would want to accommodate, both employment and housing. Our existing capacity, of course, is 12.6. We have our existing activity units. The number of people we have out there right now is about 12.6. We have a comp plan capacity of 20,000. That means we need to add about 21,000 people within this area to get to that 33,000 number. One of the things about it is that that means an increase in our capacity, however, of about 12,200. So it's not, as big as you might think, but we still have to accommodate quite a few more people. One of the things I want to caution here, these are very preliminary numbers. We're still working on some of these things. And we also have to apply what's called a market factor. And basically what there is a certain number of properties that will not develop within your lifetime of your plan. And it ranges from 15% to 30%, just depending upon the market. We want to make sure we have to add that number into this. This is just the pure net numbers that we have to meet. So you'll probably see when we actually do the actual planning, there'll be a little bit more than that within the actual plan numbers. But that basically means that we do have some work to do. However, there are options. And one of those is to reduce the potential boundary area, so make it a little bit smaller. So let's say, and here's an example, 613 acres at 45, that's 27,000 activity units. We have about 11,300 existing activity units within that reduced size. We would only need about 16,300 to get to where we need to be, which is only an increase in capacity of about 10,000. So that's, again, something that we want to explore with the council as we go through some of these provisions. Now, I have some maps here that I am going to hand out. So take one and pass them along. No, two separate maps. Yeah, there's two maps there. And I just wanted really briefly, as we identify this going out, that we do have some transportation news we wanted to share. Of course, first of all is that the SWIFT line from Community Transit has initiated. It is in effect right now. WashDOT is approaching the 15% design of the second express toll lane, or ETL, from 522 to 527. The legislature authorized bonding future ETL movement, which is an amazing thing because that allows this project to occur within the time frame of 2024 that the Sound Transit is identifying. Sound Transit, of course, is working on bus rapid transit along 405. That's a great thing. One of the things that we do have to identify, and it's one of those unfortunate things, is that Sound Transit has informed us they are going to be acquiring 12.5 acres within our regional growth center, and that's going to add some challenges to what we do in the future. And of course, this is a couple of examples of those big transportation projects that we really, really want to talk about as we go into it. What have we been doing? We had an open house in April that we had a bunch of folks come and attend and tell us what their ideas are for the area. We also did, the consultant has been doing a lot of kind of scenario planning. Okay, what makes sense where? And based upon a whole number of factors that they've been considering, market, the capacity of land, transportation, how close it is to some of the transit facilities, and applying some good urban design concepts there. That's one of the other things we have to worry about. We've got two alternatives in your hand. One is called Live Work. The other is called Business Plus. And basically, these are kind of the bookends, all right, so that identify what we would analyze as we do our environmental process. And one of the things that we're doing with this process is very similar to what we did downtown. We're doing a planned action environmental impact statement. That basically means that we're going to be doing the planning and the environmental analysis up front before we actually get to the development stage. So when we get to the development stage, the developer has a much simpler process. If he follows our vision and what we've established, then they can get a much quicker response to the environmental process. The live work has about a mix of 32% population and 68% jobs. The business plus is 20% population and 80% jobs. Again, going back to the vision, the economic analysis, the economic engine that this area is a very key thing that we want to hold on to. So we are very, very cognizant of that factor, and we're trying to make that occur. One of the things you're going to look at, as you look at these maps, you're going to see little circles. There's going to be a gold or yellow circles, and there's going to be red circles. Basically, that means 100 activity units in either residential or jobs. And so you can see how we have kind of spaced those out preliminarily to try and take care of a couple things. And of course, one is, of course, the adjacency of transit. That is a real key feature. We want to make sure that anything we do is really able to take advantage of those transit and transportation improvements that is occurring there. One of the other things you see up there, you see some thicker gold and thinner gold lines. Those are basically areas which make more sense for retail activities. Again, we heard a lot of the information about we want retail out here. Where would you place those? And so those are kind of the areas that right now make the most sense for those retail activities. You can see the difference between the two is, and I'll just identify this. There's a little numbers, and those are kind of individual blocks. Basically what the consultant identified. Let's divide this into little blocks so we can, a little easier to analyze and what's going on. You can see the different layers of development of both retail and employment and housing. And those basically identify the scale of development that we would anticipate within the area. So this has been a really fascinating exercise that we've been doing. I'd like to hear some comments you have on these items. Again, these are all preliminary. We're still working on some of these, but these kind of are the bookends. What will happen is someplace in the middle is where we'll probably end up being. Once we go through a more public engagement, once we have more discussion with the council, as well as we're going to have to go through a process, a sub-area planning process that's going to be occurring. Speaking of that, this is kind of the next steps, and we are going to take advantage of that $400,000 right away. And interestingly enough, the colors in blue, oh, there we go. The colors in blue are what we're doing underneath this current phase. The colors in, ooh, that's a really strange color, whatever that is. These are the things we're going to do with the $400,000. And what you're going to see, and this is what we're so excited about, we get this done in 2020. And we will have this ready to go as soon as we can do this. And so these other activities, and you're going to look at this list, oh goodness, that's a lot of work. You have $400,000, you can get a lot of work done. And that's the key. So by the end of 2020, and the next year and a half almost, we're going to be really busy and having a lot of fun with this project. So open to questions, or I'd like to hear your discussion points and all those wonderful things that we do in a study session. So thank you.
Thanks, Bruce. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Great presentation.
Thank you.
Very excited about the $400,000. So I wanted to know, you touched a little bit on changing the boundary of the Regional Growth Center. And you didn't really show how or where, but I'm assuming we're cutting out the wetlands.
Yes. Whoa, sorry. Apologies there, I'm hitting the wrong button. You see this is the new kind of boundary area, and it makes the most sense to remove lands that you can't develop upon. You cannot develop on a wetland or a wetland buffer or a stream buffer or anything like that. So having those in your regional growth center is a detriment. So by removing those, our numbers bounce up.
It makes perfect sense. I was curious, what's the process? I assume we have to go through some sort of process with PSRC?
Yes, and I'm sorry, I need to show you, this is the existing boundary, this dashed line here of the RGC. And so this would be the revised boundary. That is a process we go through with Puget Sound Regional Council. And as we develop this plan, we'll have more engagement with them. Right now, there's, okay, well, give us the numbers, give us the studies, give us the information, and then they can evaluate that. One of the things that's of interest is that the framework actually identifies 640 acres as their preferred maximum size. We're over that by almost 100 acres. So anything we do to reduce our size is more in line with their framework.
That's convenient. So I can't help but kind of connect this back to our other presentations tonight. So when it comes to kind of the knowledge we have about stream health and whatnot, I assume that in doing this, we'll have opportunities to maybe address some of the buffers and that sort of thing.
Well, actually, one of the things that's kind of fascinating about this whole project is it just started in the mid-1980s. And so that was a real different mindset as to how you look at those type of waters.
The closer the better to the water, right?
for the better. I'm sorry, yes, and it has been for the better. And we do have much more robust, if you would, critical area regulations. This is going to be mostly redevelopment of existing sites. And that's when those new procedures and new standards will be applied.
Great. And then you didn't really talk about it. You made reference to the 12 acres for the bus barn.
Yes.
What kind of impact is that in terms of AUs?
Here's one way to look at it. You can see in, you can see in both scenarios that block number 7, and the bus barn is located right here. We are, again, calling for quite a bit of activity units within that area. Depending upon which scenario goes, it's more or less. It is an impact. There's just no doubt about it.
So we haven't accounted for that yet.
Not yet, and that's one of the things that with the firm knowledge that Sound Transit has selected that at that location, we do need to start making those kind of adjustments.
Yeah, it's very unfortunate.
And Sound Transit has indicated that they would like to work with us in looking at TOD opportunities on that site. They've also indicated that they're going to need every square inch of that site, so I'm not sure just how much flexibility they have in designing it, but we will be engaging with them to see if there's some opportunities. They're going to have some office at least on the site. So one of our thoughts, initial thoughts at least, and we haven't discussed this with Sound Transit yet, is instead of residential, maybe if there's a way that they could increase the space for office, so we could at least get some additional AUs out of that site that we wouldn't get otherwise. Because right now, the estimate that I've heard from them in terms of employment would be about 200 to 300 AUs, which is considerably less than what we would like to see on a 12.5 acre site.
Yeah, the jobs AUs, it seems like would be a more efficient use of space to be able to rack up the numbers.
Oh, yes.
So, okay, super. Well, now that we have the 400,000, I hope we're going to be seeing you for a while, Bruce.
For a while.
I.e., don't go anywhere, like retire.
Ooh, that's a nasty word.
All right, any other questions? Councilmember McAuliffe?
Thank you. I just want to look at options because that's what we're going to do as you make these decisions. So as you get into the business plus math, then your options might be taller buildings and more height. Is that correct?
Absolutely, yes.
And then as you get into your residential, would it be more people within a smaller space, so like condos, residents with cottages, different options like that?
More along the lines of the kind of residential tower concept. You're probably going to have some type of what we call floor area ratio, where you establish a certain number that has to be constructed on the site. Maybe even as far as having a minimum density that we have to achieve.
I think that's really important to look at those options. Appreciate that. Thank you.
You bet.
Councilmember Zorns?
I'm going to ask a stupid question, but if I don't ask it, someone's going to be thinking it. So, the 733 acres that you were talking about, and we whittled it down to 613?
Around that, Yes.
The 733, that is with the wetlands pulled
That
out?
yes, that is a gross calculation, includes all those wetland
Oh, it
areas.
includes the wetlands.
Yes.
'Cause
And
I was
there's almost 200 and some odd acres of that type of
Okay.
open space within
Because
that
I
area.
was going to ask a question where they were talking about putting the buses in. Could we just take a cookie cutter out and say, this is not part of our regional growth center? And then, you know, put that in somewhere else and still have?
That's certainly something we can talk about. Our issue is.
I'm sure it's a silly question that you're like,
No,
we've
actually,
talked
it's
about
not a
it,
silly
but-
question, because one of the things that, and hopefully we aren't getting so desperate that we're grasping for any option, but the concept there is that it's tough because of its location.
It is in a sweet spot.
It's kind of right there, right in the middle area. So that makes it harder to draw a square or rectangle around it saying, this is not part of the RGC. But one of the many options we may have to look at, some other areas, including, and you'll notice on the map, one of the study areas is north of our city limits right now in Snohomish County. They have kind of an urban center designation in their comp plan for that area up there. And you can see we're looking at what that does for our growth potential, and it's not too bad. It's primarily residential, of course, but it's not bad. So one of the things we're going to be doing is we're going to be making a couple trips up to Everett, having some nice discussions with our compatriots.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Councilmember McNeil.
Thank you, Mayor. So in kind of looking at the map where the park and ride is up there now, in the business jobs, well, that, yeah, 32%. So business job side, it looks like that would become all jobs.
Yes, one of the things that we want to explore with the Washington State Department of Transportation is the ability to do something above the park and ride lot, do some type of a structure, again, along the lines of what we're considering with Sound Transit, basically offices or some type of other type of use above the park and ride lot.
Okay, and then so in the live work option, it looks like that would be residential units?
Yeah, and that's because that's what we want to explore as our bookends, even though it makes more sense probably because of the location to be a office type of a facility. But there are some advantages to residential there, and one is the fact that you could get right on to the BRT system, really have that, you know, that almost that transit-oriented development feel there. And you're right next to the area that we're looking at, probably the best retail areas. So there's pluses and minuses either way, but it most certainly needs to have some more activity units within that area.
Okay, and then it looks like for the number 6 is kind of a mix. It's more medium than highly or high retail.
Yes, and one of the interesting things is that as part of this analysis, they looked at the valuation of some of these pieces of property. And when you look at some of the valuations, they have a very high improvement value to land value because we've got some really sophisticated laboratory equipment within some of these buildings that's really expensive. So it's less likely that that will be removed and converted to something else than it would be otherwise. So one of the factors that we're trying to take into account is that, yeah, we could put a whole bunch of dots right here, but it may not make sense because we do have that high value to land area. But we do want to have kind of a different look to these two alternatives we're looking at, and so that we can understand what the impacts are between a lot of residential in relationship or a lot of jobs in relationship, because they have really different transportation demand management issues. And so that'd be one of the things that we want to understand fully as we go through this process.
And the visioning process would also look at, is it more inward facing versus outward facing?
Yeah, in fact, that's one of the things that when we get into some of more of the design aspect, and I know our consultant has been really chomping at the bit to start on that path, is okay, what areas make sense to have an outward kind of a look? And as you can probably predict, it's these areas right along here, right next to the 527 corridor. That has the most ability. Although, interestingly enough, when we were in some of our open house shops, people were talking about the North Creek Trail as a really key feature that they'd like to have some openness to. So we have probably 2 or 3 really great opportunities to look at some of those different live-work experiences, if you would.
Okay, and then the south side of 405 there, can you explain that one a little bit?
Yes, yes. This is an area that's basically, somewhat isolated from the Canyon Park business area, but it is a very active retail area. In fact, we have some really great companies. And, as you saw, some of the folks identified, hey, we don't want you to do something that would drive these, and a lot of them small businesses, but some of them are large, good size. We don't want you to do something to drive these away. So we are looking at primarily underneath both scenarios, this is a residential area. And again, that's because retail facilities and retail sales makes a lot more sense, is more compatible with residential than, basically having your retail sale down below and having jobs above, although they both kind of work, but we like the idea. The other thing we're thinking really long-term, and you'll appreciate this, as you have a discussion with the folks at WashDOT about the south leg of the 17th Avenue interchange, we're looking at this area is just awesome for transit-oriented development.
Yeah, it kind of appears that way based on what they're talking about there. And then last question, the park, are you talking about within this area, or are you talking about just outside of this area?
Well, that's where we get to have some fun here, because we can talk about both. And, and of course, it's tough because we have property values that are very high. So it's hard for that property owner to say, well, I'm going to give up an acre for this kind of a facility. But we can do kind of the same concept as our half-acre park in downtown. Have some smaller scale, more adult-themed type open space areas or plazas or all those kind of items. You have some food courts around them and those kind of items. That's an important amenity as well. So it doesn't have to just be sports fields, although that'd be awesome. Or some other type of an activity unit. So, in fact, as we were walking out here, there's this really neat little open space area right here that would be awesome for some type of a little plaza, and so our design people were, oh, this would be great. They're getting all excited about what they could do there. But that's what it's going to be. We're going to basically try and find out those opportunities as we have these discussions.
Yeah, that'd be great. I don't think. Personally, being a coach, I think that sports fields are great, love sports fields, but, I go to work every day too, and the thing that I notice is people want to go out and recreate during the day at lunch, right? And that's an amenity that businesses would love to have for their employees, so it can go both ways, right? At night, it can be something for the community, and during the day, it can be something for workers, so hand in hand, having those spaces is important.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point because we had some pretty good engagement with employees as well. And they were identifying that they love the walk and the trails. Those are big things, but they'd like to have a little bit more. And I think that's why you saw in the engagement, we actually did have so many people identify, look, park, that is a really key component that's kind of missing out here.
Yeah, I think partnerships with businesses up in that area could help us immensely to create those active spaces for our community. So.
Absolutely, yes.
Thank you.
You bet.
All right. Anybody else? No, you're good. I had a couple questions. So on the Area 5 there, is that Area 5 on the map there? That seems an awfully big area for a very little amount of growth. Is that because of Phillips? Is that all Phillips?
It's all Phillips, yeah. It's a single property owner. And essentially what we're looking at is that we've had some engagement with them, but not a lot. And you want to be a little careful how much you volunteer somebody who hasn't really had an opportunity to speak to that area. But it's pretty full, and unless you go up. And one of the conversations we had with Phelps is they said, look, every square foot of our facility is being used. We can't just shut down like half the building and build on top of it or something like that. They did identify that as an item that they have a concern with, but that's kind of an operational thing more than it is from our standpoint. But we didn't want to rely too much on that area. Plus, in fact, it's a little different, a little more difficult to get to. Even though it's right off of, 527 and they have a stop right here, it's not quite as convenient to get up that hill as it is in some of the other locations. In fact, one of the things you'll see is that this hillside area up here does not have a lot of development activity units, I should say, in either one of these options, just because, well, one, it's fairly new. It's one of the newer sections of the park or the area, but also because of that separation component.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that was my next question was what's the deal with Area 8? And then so in the Business Plus scenario, you have an army of dots in the Area 6.
Yes.
And I think they're parked right on top of, that's North Creek, right? It goes right through the middle of that thing?
Sort of. North Creek basically runs right through this area here. And yeah, I know there's a lot of, they certainly wouldn't be placed on top of North Creek. They would be basically to either side of North Creek, yes, indeed.
But with the creek and the buffers,
Absolutely,
we still
yes.
can pack that in there.
Well, and it predicated upon how tall we think the companies are with going with their structures. And we had a conversation with a rep from Seattle Genetics who says, we're very comfortable with going tall. It's just a matter of how much, of course, but they are not afraid of that type of a development. And one of the things, and they're a prime example, because they have 11 buildings that they're occupying out here. I mean, they got 1,300 employees. They're a big company that does a lot of work. I think it'd be wonderful for them to have one central location, even if it was very tall.
So that was another question. The biomedical industry, this is a biomedical industry hub, I think we call it. So that's obviously being played into the planning of this area?
You bet. In fact, one of the things that we wanted to make sure is, and that's kind of where the mixture of land uses, the more urban style is important, because according to most of these employers, they say, look, our people are usually younger and they like that urban style of living. They fall in love with downtown Bothell. And then they go up there and say, well, how come we don't have that here? And we say, well, give us a little time.
Just takes money. I think those were all the questions that I had off the top of my head. Did you want us to kind of weigh in on kind of which way we would lean? You got the bookends here, obviously, but is that...
If you feel comfortable doing that, I know I'm just kind of springing this on you at the last minute. Some of this is just literally hot off the press today, so we'll have more opportunities.
More opportunity for that, okay.
Yes, indeed.
And then my other question is, maybe this might be a litigation matter, but is there anything we can do about Sound Transit parking a 100-some acre garage in the middle of our regional growth center?
Well, fortunately, we have our city attorney here. Sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
That's probably something best left for executive session.
Okay. I'd be curious to know what our options are. All right, on that happy note, thank you, Bruce. I think everybody else had a chance to talk. Yeah, okay. All right, so we are on to our last agenda item, which is the council conversations. I had one that I'd like to bring up. So last week, we had a bit of a snafu, I would say, with council. So we had two people, they were on vacation. One person was sick and is still sick. And then I had to leave for work. So the blame could go all around, but we were, we had to basically not scrap the agenda, but we had to like take a whole bunch of stuff out of the agenda and put on other agendas. And so I just wanted to say, like, that's pretty disruptive to the city. When we figured it out at lunchtime, I called Jennifer. I was like, we've got a problem. Like, we might not have a quorum. And so so we had to whittle down the agenda. So it just, in the future, and that hasn't happened, I think, since I've been on council. I'm trying to remember if that's ever happened before. And I don't think it has. So that's 8 years. And I think it's really important that we try to be really thoughtful about trying to make sure we can make meetings. My work situation is of such I have to go to council meetings at a different city. And of course, they're at the exact same day of the week. So that's my excuse. But, excuses aside, I think we got to do what we can, because now we're going to have some pretty stacked up agendas for a couple more council meetings, because we had to move what we could. We had two different private businesses. We had Recology that we had to call and cancel basically like at lunchtime, and then also the Lime Bike that we had to just call them and say, we can't take your agenda item. So I just want to throw that out there. Just if we could just try the best we can to have good attendance. We kind of have the same thing on the boards and commissions too. So I just think kind of in general, if the elected and the volunteers that get on the boards and commissions if they're obstructing city business, then we're obviously going to have a problem. So I just want to throw that out there. That's my council conversation topic. Oh, you want me to talk about that too? So we had a huge victory at the state this year. I mean, gigantic victory for the city of Bothell. Deputy mayor was huge. I went to the mayor's meeting, and well, there's actually a second half to that. This is a good sign. The 3 of the mayors there were like, "Thanks for taking my employees." So, and they were mad, which is a great sign for us. So that aside, then we talked about what everybody got in their legislative asks, and I think Woodinville got $1 million for whatever. And I was like, yeah, we got $670 million project on 405. And they did. They all took a moment to say like, wow, Davina really had her fingerprints all over that thing and really shepherded that thing through. So a big thank you to you for really pushing hard and getting that done in this legislative session. I know a lot of us had some involvement here and there along the way, but yeah, the whole region recognized Davina's efforts in getting that done. So, and then we just talked about the 400,000 that we got. We got the bridge at Bothell Landing funded. I'm forgetting one more. Oh yeah, we got more money to clean up dirty dirt, which is one of our favorite things to do in Bothell. So we had a huge, oh yeah, the police academy, that's a statewide. We don't count all those victories. Just bragging about our own. But yeah, we did really good. I don't know if it was the consultant help or if it was, I'm sure that helped. We had a consultant, whatever you call it, a lobbyist. And I think that obviously might have been a good investment. On top of just, council members, I think all of us at one point or another went down there and testified. So thanks to the council for doing that and staff for doing what you guys do to help get those things informed with good information instead of us getting up there and talking on a microphone. So, yeah. Did you want to say more to it?
Well, I think when I talked to the lobbyist, the mayor and I were down there the Saturday before the vote. We got a call the day before. It was an 8 o'clock hearing. So we were up at 6:30 and out the door, and we get there, and the legislators had been in session till 5:45 a.m. So it was postponed till 10:30. But I think it was us showing up, and the lobbyist said she's never seen any city sweep like that before. So I think we should be really proud, all of us. I know we all made the effort, so I think we should be taking victory dances. That's all I'm saying.
And I think I wanted to add to that because I think it's important to recognize State Senator Guy Palumbo and our representatives, Shelley Kloba and Derek Stanford, because it really takes their push as well to bring us as much as they did. So I'd like the minutes to reflect our appreciation of their attention to Bothell's needs.
We had a letter sent to them as well to thank them, but you're absolutely right, without particularly Senator Palumbo, because he got the 405 through the Senate, and then I don't know if it was shame or what, but it definitely pushed the legislature as well. So yeah.
So I think the idea behind council conversations is I sit back and you guys just talk. So feel free to talk. Maybe not at the same time, but.
Yeah, I just want to say, when Davina and James and you were already on really ran, just almost 4 years ago, I think there was a big push to be more regionally involved and make that an effort, get on more committees, have Bothell engaged more, and then Jean and I coming on, and Rosemary, you know, with all her connections, and, you know, Tom steadfast on here, just continuing that. I think it's really, you know, paying off, and we're all on committees, we're all engaged all around. So, I mean, I think this is, you know, the correct path to be on, and shows what happens when you reach out and are a connected city.
Is it my turn? Okay. I'm not going to pound the neighborhood signs, but it will be back. I got two different drums to pound. One is, what's that? Well, no, not crows. Yeah, no, but one is, I have been approached, and we have talked about meeting with boards and commissions as a council together, and I got this okayed from our city manager. And the idea is that we meet, someone had suggested monthly, and I'm thinking that's might be overkill, but quarterly or twice a month, as long as we don't have a quorum out of the council or any of the boards and commissions, up to what? Less, what, 40% of their boards and commissions who want to meet together for coffee, like say a Saturday morning. Just get together, talk about, get to know each other, build those relationships, talk about things that are on our minds and things that we are working on might be a good thing to do. And we do have the one event coming up next week with the artists in residence, but there is a definite interest in some of the boards and commissions to meet together with council in just a relaxed frame. And I don't know if anyone would be willing to once or twice a year give up a Saturday to hang out and have coffee and meet with people who are on our boards and commissions, just as a relaxed way to get to know and talk about things around Bothell. So that's one thing. The other thing is, I got a call from a constituent, and I'm speaking for them, because as a mom who's raised 4 boys, I appreciate fireworks. I love fireworks. But the comment was made to me is that we could evoke an emergency hold on fireworks. They had been tracking what's being forecasted for the month of July, and they're concerned that it may be a high fire season, and that as a council, we might want to talk about, is this 4th of July where we ban fireworks? And I love fireworks, and so it's, you know, it's like, oh yeah, you're right, we probably ought to have that conversation. So, and I understand the pressure that residents have with, there are some hot spots in Bothell where that neighbor other municipalities, they like to trot into Bothell where fireworks are legal, and they raise havoc. And so for our Bothell residents who live in those parts, it can be traumatizing. So I don't know, one, if a fireworks ban for this year is something that you want to talk about or think about, or if you want to be monitoring what the forecasts are and what the time frame is. But we're getting close to 4th of July, and if it's something we should be thinking about, we need to get on it.
So there's like a 1-year cooling period, or not cooling period, or whatever it's called, that if you make a ban on fireworks, you have to wait a year. But we did something. Did we do something?
We have the ability to ban fireworks if the weather is bad and it's dry as a tinderbox. We have that ability. We passed that a few years ago. So we do have that at our disposal.
What's the timing though? Because I think there's a certain time frame for that, right? Do we know offhand what that is? And
Well, I think that the emergency ban that Councilmember Agnew was discussing is under 837-215. That doesn't speak to a specific time period because of the nature of emergencies. The council does have the ability with ordinances, and this is a little bit different, but with ordinances, to invoke emergency bans based on the circumstances. Normally, an ordinance would go into effect either 5 or 30 days after its passage. But with emergencies, obviously, it can take immediate effect. If there is such an emergency in this situation, it could to be effective immediately. And then there would be, according to the code, there'd be an end date. But so we'd have to, if you'd like me to look into that, I can brief the council a little bit more as to what the conditions would look like in order to invoke that emergency section.
I would be interested, and I've heard that it's supposed to be a super dry summer, so.
Okay.
Can I go?
Oh, yeah.
Is this open mic season?
It's open mic.
All right.
That's what you guys want to try.
Well, let me just get this started by saying there's a lot of, you did great work. Thank you very much for all you did. I would say that having the lobbyists for the city of Bothell, huge dividends for us. So the decision the council made to do that, had huge impacts in making sure that we were heard. I want to thank all the council members for all of the hard work and effort that we're putting forward right now regionally. It is amazing going to these committee meetings and hearing people around the table at PIC and others talk about the stuff that we're doing locally here in Bothell. So first and foremost, that's awesome. Now let me get into the juicy stuff. Senior Center. Big issue with our senior center right now. We need the support of King County and Snohomish County, Woodinville and Kenmore to work with us to ensure that our senior center is maintained and has the funding necessary to keep its doors open. So we're going to have a meeting tomorrow night. I've reached out to the King County Council member Rod Dembowski and Terry Ryan, Snohomish County. Liam, are you going to be at the meeting tomorrow?
Yeah.
And I'm getting serious right now. Yeah. Tom, are you going to be at the meeting tomorrow? Councilmember Agnew. We need to ensure that somehow, some way, we get into this meeting tomorrow. We ensure that we get some kind of a letter. We go speak to King County Council and Snohomish County Council and make sure that they're doing their part as well. It cannot fall on the cities alone. Our city manager has gone above and beyond to try to ring things in on that senior center, and everybody else needs to put their hat in the ring as well. So tomorrow, I'm chairing that meeting tomorrow, and I would like to ensure that both of you are there. We get the support that we need to make this go forward. Okay. On a side note, positive note, because this is council conversation, we can talk about whatever we want, right? I am super excited about the fact that my kids got to go to Olympia yesterday. And one of my sons met Jay Inslee. Oh, guess who? Marian. And he goes up to Jay Inslee and says, "Do you know my dad?" And he says, "Who's your dad?" He goes, "James McNeil." And he goes, "Well, of course I know James." So my son, in front of his whole class, was ear to ear smiling, and it was the greatest day of his life for the governor to actually acknowledge he knew his dad. So that means that I'm doing something right. So thank you.
I've talked to the city manager about this. Memorial Day's coming up. We have one park in the city that's to memorialize veterans, but everybody calls it the Park at Bothell Landing. It's the one that has all those flags from the Army and the Air Force and the Navy and the Marines and the Coast Guard. Has all the little tiles of the servicemen that gave their lives for this country. I'd like to reinvent that a little bit again. I'd like to go out and have more people buy tiles. I was just at a reunion of sorts of the people that I was in the service in, and a lot of us are gone. And I'm not doing it for the Vietnam veterans, I'm doing it for all veterans. We owe those veterans a little gratitude, and a little park with a flag on it is all they really want and ask for. When I was in the service, there were 3.2 million service members that served in the Vietnam War, and right now there's 800,000 left. So we've lost over 2/3 of them. I had the privilege of welcoming back a bunch of troops that just came back from a deployment in Afghanistan down in Fort Carson, and that was really nice to do. and they're carrying on the tradition also. So, you know, I'd like to bring that back up. I'd like to move forward with it at some point in time, and I want all of you to just think about it a little bit. Thanks.
Second time around. But I just, there was one other person I was going to thank when we talked about our gains from the legislatures, but particularly I wanted to recognize Senator Steve Hobbs, who is the chair of transportation, who I spoke to many times as well about our 405. So I think that we want to, you know, I know our people did a good job, but he also cares about this area as well. And then to your veterans, you know, one of the things that really bothers me is when they took out the Triangle Park, where there was a flag, there was a memento to Rich Worthington's son, who was a veteran, and that was dedicated, that area of the Triangle Park was dedicated to him. So if you are going to move forward, I would hope that he would be one of the ones that we reestablish the memory. Thank you.
Was that originally done as an Eagle Scout project?
Yeah, I think it was.
Because I don't know how many times I've been asked by Eagle Scouts, do you have any ideas for projects? So maybe we could work that
I'd
angle.
be happy to talk to you.
I'm just saying.
Whatever we do, let's make sure the tiles are actually thick, because that was unfortunate what happened with the Main Street. When they tried to take the tiles off, they just crumbled. And
Right. They'd be decent tiles.
that'd be good. I think there's 3 of you that are working or talking with youth about the youth council. Is that what it is?
Yes.
So is there an update on that? Or, because I think last time we talked as a group, I think there was going to be a meeting or something like that, and just curious where it's at.
Okay, so basically, I have, I've been taking steps to establish a Bothell Youth Council. And so I've met with the city of Kirkland, and they are helping us to kind of take the appropriate steps. I've also met with North Shore School District Superintendent, who wants to partner with us. And I met with the YMCA, who also wants to partner to create a Bothell Youth Council. I really want to do this one step at a time. The next step is a task force that will be on the 22nd? Yeah, May 22nd at the Bothell Police Station. And I believe City Manager Jennifer, you have accepted that as well. There's about 7 other people. The facilitator is from the city of Kirkland, who will help us to develop what is the plan. If you're going to create a Bothell City Council, what are the students going to do? What's the plan? How is this going to develop? And then the following step would be to present to council at one point, maybe in September, the plan itself, and see if you would like to also be a partner. So that's kind of the steps we're taking. But at this point, I'm still with other city council people who are interested in this, still in the process of developing the plan.
Do we know, from having talked to Kirkland, what the costs are for that? I don't think I've only been to one meeting, so I'm not
Right.
sure where we're at.
That's another part that we will develop as we go along. At this point, there is no cost because it's all been volunteer. But when you if you decide as a city that you're going to have a staff person, that would be a cost. But if you decide that's not what you're going to do, then that's a decision that comes on later.
But are we developing it after the Kirkland model, which does have an employee?
No, we do not. We are not at this point.
Okay.
So I just, I did drop the mic, but I just had a question. The plaque that's on the building out here, on the City Hall building, and then I see them at the North Creek Sports Fields bathroom, those kind of plaques, how do those come about? How do we decide to do plaques like that?
That's a good question.
I'm going to give it a go. Are you referring to the dedication plaques? So
Yeah, like the
lead
bronzes
and-
colored plaques, yeah.
yeah. So typically when we build new buildings, we do that dedication of who was on the council and who it was built by and all of that. And then for this building, we also have our LEED Gold, I think, LEED Gold plaque out there as well. I don't know the one at the ball fields.
So I actually believe it's by resolution. I'd have to go back and look, but I believe I've read it. It is in a resolution that any new facility that you build requires that.
Requires it, and/or acquisitions?
So acquisitions would typically require, your funding agencies be recognized.
Okay.
And I have one more. So I just want to announce that First in Main, the store on the corner down there, the new people that have come in, have had a soft opening. They are open, and their grand opening is this weekend. So anybody that gets a chance to go in, please look at the white curtains that came out of my house that they decorated with. I went in today, and it's absolutely fabulous. So anybody that gets a chance, please go in and visit them and welcome them to the community.
Speaking of plaques, and this may be a premature question, we've talked in the past about creating plaques that people can put as, to mark off trees and things, like memorial trees and things. Is that still on the back burner, or are we progressing more with that?
So the current resolution as it reads does not allow for plaques on trees. And it's very specific to what kind of plaques you can put down, for example, on a bench or something like that.
But we haven't moved to, for some reason I thought that we were revisiting that and coming up with some alternatives. We haven't moved any further on that?
I'm not aware of any movement on that.
Okay, all right, thank you.
I think we're done with our conversation. We're all good? Yeah? Okay. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilmember McCullough, second by Deputy Mayor. Any discussion? See none, raise your hand, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Passed unanimously. We're adjourned.